The pressure surrounding the White House has been steadily building, but in recent weeks, it has reached a point where multiple unresolved policy decisions are now converging at the same time. Inside Washington, officials privately describe this moment as one where delays are no longer sustainable. Choices that were once pushed down the road are now unavoidable, and each decision carries consequences that extend far beyond politics, directly shaping the daily lives of ordinary Americans. At the center of this pressure is the economy. While official data shows that the United States has avoided a full-scale recession, the experience on the ground tells a more complicated story. Inflation has eased from its peak, but prices have not returned to pre-pandemic levels. Rent, food, insurance, and healthcare costs remain significantly higher than just a few years ago. For many families, paychecks are stretched thin long before the end of the month. Credit card balances are rising, savings are shrinking, and financial insecurity has become a common reality even for middle-income households. The White House faces a difficult balancing act. On one hand, it must reassure markets and international partners that the U.S. economy remains stable and resilient. On the other hand, it must address the growing frustration of voters who feel that economic recovery has left them behind. The administration has pointed to job growth, wage increases in certain sectors, and infrastructure investment as signs of progress. But critics argue that these gains are uneven and slow to reach the people who need them most. A major constraint on economic policy comes from the Federal Reserve, which operates independently of the White House. Interest rates remain high as the Fed continues its effort to control inflation. These higher rates have made borrowing more expensive across the economy. Mortgage payments have surged, pushing homeownership out of reach for many first-time buyers. Small businesses face higher loan costs, limiting their ability to expand or hire. Consumers rely more heavily on credit cards, often at record interest rates, simply to cover basic expenses. Although the White House does not control interest rates, it faces public pressure to respond. Many Americans do not distinguish between the roles of the Fed and the administration. They simply want relief. The challenge for policymakers is that pushing too aggressively for economic stimulus risks reigniting inflation, while restraint risks prolonging financial pain for households. The future outcome depends heavily on whether inflation continues to cool without triggering widespread job losses, a scenario economists describe as a soft landing, but one that remains far from guaranteed. At the same time, legislative gridlock has limited the White House's ability to act decisively. The United States Congress remains deeply divided, with narrow margins and partisan disagreements blocking comprehensive reforms on taxes, healthcare, immigration, and social spending. As a result, the administration has relied increasingly on executive actions and regulatory changes. While these tools allow for faster implementation, they are inherently less durable. Policies enacted through executive authority can be challenged in court or reversed by future administrations, creating uncertainty for businesses, state governments, and individuals who depend on these programs. This uncertainty affects common people in subtle but significant ways. When policies are temporary or legally contested, families hesitate to plan for the future. Businesses delay investments. State and local governments struggle to allocate resources. The result is a sense of instability that extends beyond politics and into everyday decision-making. Foreign policy adds another layer of complexity. Ongoing global conflicts, shifting alliances, and trade tensions place additional demands on the White House at a time when domestic priorities are already stretched. Military aid, sanctions, and diplomatic engagements may seem distant to many Americans, but their economic consequences are immediate. Energy prices, supply chain disruptions, and federal spending priorities are all influenced by international developments. The administration must weigh national security interests against domestic fatigue with prolonged overseas commitments and the financial cost of maintaining a global leadership role. Immigration policy remains one of the most visible and politically charged issues contributing to the current pressure. Border crossings, asylum processing backlogs, and the strain on local communities have intensified debates across the country. The White House faces criticism from multiple sides: those demanding stricter enforcement, those calling for more humane policies, and local officials seeking federal support to manage housing, healthcare, and public safety challenges. The lack of comprehensive immigration reform has left the administration managing a system widely acknowledged as broken, with limited tools and conflicting demands. For everyday Americans, the impact is felt at the community level. Cities and towns absorb the cost of emergency shelters, school enrollment changes, and healthcare services. Tensions rise as resources are stretched and political rhetoric often overshadows practical solutions. The long-term outcome depends on whether policymakers can move beyond short-term fixes towards sustainable reforms, something that has eluded Washington for decades. Healthcare policy is another area where pressure is mounting. Rising insurance premiums, prescription drug costs, and hospital expenses continue to burden families. While incremental reforms have lowered costs for some medications and expanded coverage in certain areas, many Americans still delay care due to expense. The White House must navigate powerful industry interests, legal constraints, and congressional resistance while responding to public demand for more affordable health care. Failure to deliver visible improvements risks deepening voter dissatisfaction and eroding trust. The broader political environment amplifies all of these challenges. With public confidence in institutions already fragile, every policy decision is interpreted through a lens of skepticism. Social media accelerates outrage, misinformation spreads quickly, and nuanced explanations struggle to gain traction. The White House is under constant pressure not only to make the right decisions, but to communicate them clearly and convincingly to a divided audience. Looking ahead, the future outcomes depend on several interconnected factors. If inflation continues to ease and wages gradually catch up to costs, economic pressure on households may lessen. If global tensions stabilize, energy and supply chains could become more predictable. If Congress breaks through gridlock on even a few key issues, it could restore some public confidence in governance. But if these conditions fail to materialize, frustration may deepen, and political polarization could intensify. For common people, the stakes are not abstract. These decisions influence whether families can afford homes, whether small businesses survive, whether healthcare remains accessible, and whether communities feel secure. The pressure on the White House is ultimately a reflection of the pressure on the country itself. As key policy decisions take center stage, the coming months will reveal whether the administration can translate governance under pressure into tangible relief for the people it serves.